shout out Case Study QB. He clipped this. Glenn Greenwald goes on the Laura Ingraham show to talk about what's happening, how the Democrats have canceled democracy, and how primaries really don't matter in a rigged system.
When Joe Biden finally announced his 2024 re-election bid last week, he might have expected a pretty easy go of it. After all, he's an incumbent, probably a glide path to the nomination. But instead, what he found was that nearly 1/3 of his party is aligned against him. 20% of Democrat voters are now lining up behind Robert Kennedy Jr. Now, that's a stunning showing for a candidate who has no real campaign operation. And even poor old Marianne Williamson, she has nearly 10% of the vote. So things are so unsettled, right? You would think that this is going to be a real robust debate season coming up for the party of democracy, right?
Some of my progressive friends who would like to live in a fantasy land, they need to come back to reality. And the reality is this. The sitting president of the United States of America is a Democrat that would like to run for re-election, so much so that he has declared a re-election campaign. In that case, the Democratic National Committee will not facilitate a primary process. There will be no debate stage for Bobby Kennedy, Marianne Williamson, or anyone else.
Now, that's not just some random pundit. That's a former senior advisor to Biden who seamlessly transitioned to the administration's press office at MSNBC. Joining us now, Glenn Greenwald. We've missed him, Pulitzer Prize-winning independent journalist. Glenn, great to see you tonight. That was a wild comment. I was in the gym and I, flipped on all the cables and I'm watching, and I said, wait a second, did she just say that? And it was so brazen. Like, don't even think there's going to be a debate. What do we make of this?
Even if you look at it from the perspective of, say, like some party apparatchik, which she is, even though she now wears the journalism hat at MSNBC, if you see polling data showing that 30% of the party is ready to back another candidate, as you say, even ones who have no campaign operation yet, that shows a lot of concern and dissatisfaction with Joe Biden. You would think if you have any respect for your voters, the last thing you would do them is to tell them, you're just going to have to swallow this. There'll be no debating, no dissent, no opposition from you. You're going to sit there and silently and take it. And yet that is their messaging because they believe, and I think with good reason, that Democrats at the last minute always snap into line.
Are they more afraid of RFK, the candidate, right, or his ideas, since all this information is now becoming accepted about the mRNA shot and, of course, all the suppression of dissenting medical views at the, for the really first 2 years of COVID?
I think it's a great point. Marianne Williamson, I interviewed her. I didn't really find huge differences between her and Biden. There's nothing she's saying that would concern anyone in Democratic Party circles, but RFK.
He says there's nothing that would concern any Democratic establishment. Nobody is seeing her at all being different. That is scathing coming from somebody who actually interviewed her, and he was fair. He wasn't trying, you know what I mean? He was trying to be fair and balanced. Like when she gave an obvious stupid answer, he didn't challenge her. He just re-asked it and tried to get her to come on to a better answer, which she never did. There's a Jimmy George show. Shout out to Jimmy George.
Shout out to Jimmy. Yeah, I read big shout out to Jimmy. FYI, the beginning of the end for the Vanguard was when I entered the super chat. And y'all forgot about this when Ryan Grimm was on their show. And they showed that they are access journalists because they had Ryan Grimm and they wanted that intercept access. So I remember that Jimmy was saying super chats being critical, giving them questions that they were too scared to ask Ryan Grimm because they don't want confrontation. So let me get this right, Vanguard. And their excuse for that, because I heard their excuse at the time. They said, well, we have a guest on. We don't want to be rude when you have a guest on. And Jimmy was asking rude questions. We didn't want to make our guests upset. So when you have Ryan Grimm on, you like, oh, we got to be nice to our guests. But you have Aaron Mate on, and you have Lee Camp, two people who are considered anti-imperialists, and you guys are assholes to them. So they are assholes to Aaron Mate, assholes to Lee Camp, but they are extremely friendly with Ryan Grimm and don't want to make Ryan Grimm uncomfortable. Do you guys see these inconsistencies? Because Ryan Grimm and Aaron Mate are not part of the club. Ryan Grimm is. So he
Ryan Grimm was the flower boy at the wedding. I don't know if you knew that. See, so everything happens for a reason.
Well, they actually, we did a segment on this. They actually went on air and said straight out, we had to pretend to like Jimmy for a while, and then we said we have to get values.
Right. Yeah, they said that.
I mean, they straight out said to their audience, we lied to you and pretended to be something that we weren't. And now
so then they were never authentic about forced to vote or anything else. What they're doing is just doing it.
That's what they said. That's what they said. They said it straight out. Straight out.
They all want it for clout.
And remember, they was mad because they in that same segment, because I saw your coverage of it, when he was like, "Yeah, there was a point where we was part of the Jimmy Dore left, and then Jimmy turned on us, and then when Jimmy turned on them, that's when he's like, fuck, we got to pivot. We got."
Well, they said because they took a passing dig at us. They said that I don't know, we were Jimmy Dore ball riders. Which Jimmy, if you're still watching, we never got an invitation to Nowhere Yours. I don't know what that's about. Apparently, it didn't pay off too well. But they accused us of that, and then they said 10 seconds later, by the way, we used to do that until we decided to get some principles, right? Because he was going too right wing, whatever the line was. But they admitted it outright.
He's going right wing as fuck. Time to get some principles.
They do this thing all the time where they say, and this is what they were doing in the stream, where they can't critique us on our ideas, so they take advantage of liberals' Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. So they say, so people who don't know us, they connect it. They like, oh, they're Jimmy Doreites. So people who liberals who hate Jimmy Dore will immediately discount us. So they call us Jimmy Doreites in order to take advantage of that. But I had Nelson Mandela's grandson on our show. We had Murray Kinley on our show.
The same day we did the other stream.
we had two Black from Black Power Media on and Black Myth podcast on. Think about all the Black leftists. Think about everyone that we have on our show. But they know that they have nothing but a liberal audience, so they call us a Dorite because they try to take advantage of Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome.
Right.
Man, they are so sneaky. They're so
sneaky.
That's
scumbag.
Anyway, thanks for big shout out to Jimmy. CJ, or sorry, anyone else who want to chime in? We
can... if you want to chime in what Jimmy said, or kind of reflect on to bring everybody back to the conversation or to the video. Glenn Greenwald interviewed Marianne Williamson. He's like, for my interview, nobody in the establishment is going to be in fear of Marianne Williamson, but RFK, they will be. Actually, let me play it, and then I'll stop it for comments. So let me play it just to refresh everybody's memory. I'll replay the last 10 seconds here, and then I'll stop it for comment.
You didn't really find huge differences between...
My bad. I didn't go far enough. Right here is where we'll go.
An A shot. And of course, all the suppression of dissenting medical views at the, for the really first 2 years of COVID.
I think it's a great point. Marianne Williamson, I interviewed her. I didn't really find huge differences between her and Biden. There's nothing she's saying that would concern anyone in Democratic Party circles. But RFK Jr., from the beginning of the pandemic, has been a very strong dissident about things that he turned out to be right about, and Dr. Fauci and Democrats turned out to be wrong about. And the last thing they want is having all of that revisited, and whether these authorities can really be trusted. He's also opposed to Biden.
So let me stop it there, and I'll get everybody to chime in. What do you think about what he says about Marianne Williamson? And then the second point that he makes, do you think the debates were cut off because of RFK and because of what he believes? They can't be on the debate stage debating vaccines. They can't be debating what's happening with COVID. They can't be debating Ukraine. So do you think that let's go to Kit, and then we'll go to the Due Dissidence guys.
Okay, well,
what's up, Kit?
Yeah, so the DNC establishment made it very clear what they want for their narrative and what they were telling people, especially during the height of the 2020 pandemic, as well as the 4 years of what was happening under Donald Trump. So they can't have the debates with RFK Jr. up there because he's breaking against the narrative, and he could potentially, again, make Joe Biden look bad on the debate stage. Plus, it will even shine a brighter light on the fact that the DNC don't have fair primaries. How many of our channels, be it from Nico House to you guys here at RBN, Due Dissidence, HardLens, Jimmy Dore, have said the same thing. The Democrats choose who they want behind closed doors. Plus, they have a thing called super delegates. And in comparison to the Republican primaries far more Democratic. And that's not saying much. Unfortunately, the thing about RFK Jr. is that his campaign still isn't being aggressive enough, in my opinion, to really call out the DNC hypocrisy, because I could see history repeating itself over again, in which, again, the DNC puts their thumb on the scale, and any challenger to the establishment pick, be it Biden or somebody else, will be favored heavily. So they can't do that. Plus, also, if you have a Democratic candidate going up against a Democratic or corporate media narrative, it makes everything the corporate media has been saying the past 4 years, dare I say it, even during the Trump years, look absolutely buffoonish. They will look like fools in front of the whole world, and it will expose them for the hypocrites and frauds that they are. Now, as for Marianne Williamson, she's not a credible threat to Biden because, one, look at her interview that she did with you guys, in which she had an absolute meltdown. And then number two, my interview that I did with Greg Marcel Dixon, who's running for Congress in South Carolina. There he is talking to her about reparations, and it starts off nice, and then she starts snapping at him, spazzing out at him. If you look at her body language when that video starts off, when Marcel Dixon is speaking to her, she's close to him, all friendly, and as soon as he starts deviating away from what is appropriate talking, at least according to Marianne Williamson, she backs away and then starts yelling at him, browbeating him, yelling. If anyone wants to check out my interview, he will tell you what happened with the aftermath, because apparently her staff was very kind and approachable to Marcel, but Marianne was absolutely hostile. So if she can't handle
the same thing. Sorry, Cal, when you continue, but our friend of the show, Comrade Misty, who I definitely trust, Marianne Williamson went to some Assange event. And then Misty says she was extremely rude to her and a few organizers there, and they had a bad taste in their mouth from Marianne Williamson since then. Once again, that comes from Comrade Misty, her anecdotal experience. You guys see how she treated me. You guys see how she treated Marcel. If you're a millionaire, if you're within her accepted class with an accepted position, she's all friendly. But if you're not, you see the Karen come out. But sorry, go ahead, kid.
I'll just end it with this. Look, if she can't handle an interview on Revolutionary Blackout Network and be criticized, if she can't handle a candidate that's running for Congress in South Carolina asking her questions about reparations, then she has no business sitting in the throne in Washington, D.C. in the White House. She's not a credible threat, and Glenn Greenwald's analysis is perfect and on point. Simple as that.
Yeah, well said. We can do distancing. I'll chime in. You guys have anything you want to add to the Glenn Greenwald part before I chime in?
Well, yeah, the photo booth left would respond with real outrage to the statement that Marianne is not different from Biden, because what they would point to is, what do you mean? You know, Kyle would say, she's for Medicare for all, Green New Deal, this and that, right? They would list off this laundry list of domestic policy differences that ultimately mean nothing, because the Democrats are able to shut those conversations down or steer them the way they want to go. Medicare for all means taking people's health insurance away, taking people's private plans away. We can't do that. Green New Deal costs too much money. The Democratic Party is perfectly willing to entertain the quote-unquote progressive candidate, like the Sanders candidate, who goes up there and talks about student debt, talks about universal health care, talks about Green New Deal. Okay, go up there, talk a big game, right? Who cares? The topics that they cannot have entertained on the stage are the topics that RFK would bring to that debate stage, which are the COVID stuff, which is the Ukraine war, which is the CIA, the deep state. Those are the issues that the Democrats can't have anybody even talking about. So yeah, Marianne superficially different from Biden in that so she says she wants Medicare for all. Okay, great. Democrats just ran a primary 3 years ago where they very, very effectively propagandized against Medicare for all. Therefore, that's not a threat to them. This guy comes up saying the CIA whacked my uncle. That they can't have. That's a different thing. That's a different thing altogether.
We mentioned. I mentioned. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Russell.
They wouldn't have debates no matter what. It wouldn't matter. You could have the most milquetoast candidates. This is their shit. They made that very clear when they walked into a court and offered as a defense against Bernie donors who were suing them for fraudulent misrepresentation of the primaries as a fair contest. This is a private organization, and if we wanted to do what they used to do in the old days and just pick the candidate in a smoke-filled back room, we could do that. That's it. Beyond that, why you would even be interested in getting politically involved in that party after they told you straight out they're going to decide who the nominee is, and you're going to swallow it. Wait, that's what they did in 2016, isn't it? That's what they did in 2020. Yep. They told you this is how they operate. So if they don't have to have debates, they're not going to. It wouldn't matter what their positions are. The fact that RFK has these kinds of positions doesn't help. But, he could be Mitt Romney and they still would not let him on a debate stage.
So I want to, and that clip of Glenn roasting Marianne Williamson is hilarious because I don't know if you guys saw the interview that he did with Marianne Williamson.
Yeah.
It was a disaster, son. Like, and I'm not talking about in terms of civility. Like, it was a very civil interview, but Glenn pressed her on foreign policy, and then bro. And the reason I said this because I'm glad that Glenn is out, roasting Marianne, because soon that shit dropped. I was talking to Glenn afterward. Glenn texted me. He was like, Nick, you gotta see this shit. I pressed Marianne Williamson on foreign policy. He told me literally right there. He sent me the clip, bro, you gotta see this shit, bro. She completely fucking failed, bro. She did horrible. That's why we did the segment after that. After you see the video,
right
now,
after, yeah.
Now you see what Glenn Greenwald thinks of Marianne, because just like RBN, I gave her a fair trial and she failed spectacularly. And people wonder why we were so opposed to her. Glenn Greenwald did the same thing. Glenn had her on. She failed the test, and he told me privately he thinks she's trash. And now I can say this story because now he went on Lauren Ingraham. A ton of people saw Glenn Greenwald say, yo, fucking ass, bro. This is what he's openly saying that she's ass. So I'm glad that's plain to see. And this is why people who support Marianne Williamson, man, lost a lot of respect for a lot of people that are doing this. And it marks you as unserious. You realize that Marianne Williamson is running for the commander-in-chief to be the leader of the executive branch. She's not running to be a Congress fucking person. Why is she only talking about shit that Congress does, the legislative branch does, if she's running to be president? This is what Glenn, unlike many of the unserious leftists that we've seen at Marianne Williamson, Crystal Ball's wedding, he understands that if you have a presidential candidate on your show, you ask them about foreign policy. You don't ask them about stuff like, do you believe in Medicare for all? Irrelevant to her position as president. And this is what idiots like the Vanguard would do. You guys support Marianne Williamson even though you guys agree on 95%. She supports funding Nazis in Ukraine. Why the fuck would anyone on the left support someone who agrees with Joe Biden on foreign policy? Why are you running for president? Fucking
right. We already have somebody.
Anyway, go ahead, guys.
I think we're coming to a close. Any last comments on anything, and then we'll get to wrap ups, what is everybody doing next? But any final comments, any lingering comments on any of the topical,
and we can do super chats too as well, CJ.
Look, the Democratic primary is going to be rigged in favor for the establishment. We're going to see history repeat itself. To anyone that's really a diehard supporter of RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, before you start giving any of your hard-earned money, start supporting community groups and activists and organizations and third parties that are actually trying to do good. If you don't want to vote, hey, consider, if you live in a citizen ballot initiative state, support citizen ballot initiatives. All right. Don't waste your time with these politicians, because the thing is, if they're not going to fight against the clear election fraud that will take place, and we're seeing it take place now, don't waste your money and time. We saw it twice with Bernie Sanders. Don't let history repeat itself 3 times in a row with yourselves. I understand people want to fight the DNC, but the DNC doesn't want to change. They're an abusive spousal partner, and you are far too pretty. All of you are far too pretty to be wasting your time with someone who's going to smack around and cheat you. So there you go.
Is RFK Jr. having a post-christening party that he could invite you guys? One more thing. People said, I heard another Christmas out here. They're like, man, why you guys are gonna have all this venom for Marianne Williamson, but you guys don't have that venom for RFK? Now, I openly said I'm not gonna support RFK, but as a point I just made earlier, I think Marianne Williamson is a joke because she supports the Ukrainian war. I criticize everyone who supports the Ukrainian war, and Marianne Williamson did. When RFK announced his campaign, I was sitting there waiting. Go ahead and say some stupid shit about Ukraine, my nigga. Go ahead, I dare you. He didn't. So my only criticism is his strategy. When it comes to Marianne Williamson, she is so garbage and so obviously unread on left issues. No, she is. I can critique her on her policy. Like I critiqued her on the two-state solution. Critiqued her, and that's what she called me a mansplainer after that. Yeah. We critique her. She ran in our interview before we get to the Ukraine war, but Glenn exposed her on that. There's real serious issues with liberals pretending to be on the left and then supporting the U.S. empire. Like that's a giant problem because I view you as an infiltrator. If you are an imperialist, but you want to represent the left because you're trying to get the left to be okay with funding Nazis in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. You want to anoint yourself as a leader and then put that as our position. That is not acceptable. And if RFK did the same thing, I would roast him too. Like when it comes to supporting war. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going too long. You guys super chats always make me fucking rant.